I think what I think is still somewhat undercovered is just the massive build out of all this, the billions and billions and billions of dollars being built out on not just physical infrastructure, but digital infrastructure and semiconductors and fabs and all the whole chain that is being built out. Like that's equivalent to the rise of electricity and railroads and the Industrial Revolution. And that build out in itself is having all sorts of consequences, good and bad.
Hello, and welcome to AI Curious. My name is Jeff Wilser. I'm a journalist, I'm a human, and I am curious about AI. Now, picture a small farming town in Texas. One morning, the residents learn that a $10 billion AI data center is going up right next door, and that thanks to some quirk of local zoning, they have no say in the matter whatsoever. And the town a few miles away gets the tax revenue. They just get the noise. This is a true story, and it's the kind of story today's guest goes and finds. Not from a press release, not from searching online, but by actually driving to this dusty town and knocking on doors. That would be my guest today, Sharon Goldman. In my book, she is one of the sharpest and most deeply sourced AI reporters working today. She spent 4 years on the AI beat, most recently as senior writer at Fortune, and she has just done this brave and kind of awesome thing of walking away from that to launch her own publication, Ground Level AI. Now, the name of her outlet, Ground Level, is the whole thesis. While most folks are covering AI from 30,000 feet, Sharon covers what's happening when AI literally touches the ground. And ground could be small Texas towns. It could be companies where AI is bumping against every bit of day-to-day life. Now, full disclosure, I know Sharon. I like Sharon. Sharon's a journalist friend. She's been on the podcast before a couple of years ago. A month ago, I was delighted to invite her to speak at the Drawing Room, this event that I barely talk about on the podcast, but I'm really excited about. It's an AI and leadership salon that I co-produce and co-host with the brilliant Jennifer Strong, host of the Shift podcast. And so we had a great time geeking out on AI last month with other leaders in AI space, companies ranging from Adobe to the New York Times to Wall Street Journal and on and on. It was a lot of fun. So we cover that a bit here at the top of the call. And more importantly, we get into some of the key trends and themes that her reporting has helped surface. The reporting from 4 towns reckoning with data centers. And we unpack the backlash behind this and how it's sort of become a proxy for how people feel about AI itself. We also get into what is arguably the biggest hot button issue in AI right now, at least at the time of recording, the Mythos and Fable saga. The short version, for those who are not paying close attention, is that Anthropic released a powerful, much hyped new model called Fable 5. And a couple of days later, the US government forced it offline, where it has stayed in a 2-week standoff that raises all kinds of questions about who really controls these models. We get into whether we're in a bubble, and Sharon's answer almost surprised me. And we cover the meta question hanging over both of our careers and many creators' careers. Can journalism even keep up with all of this stuff? We had a lot of fun, covered a lot of grounds. I think it's a really good insight into the key trends shaping AI right now. So with that, please enjoy my conversation with Sharon Goldman, the founder of Ground Level AI. Sharon, welcome back to AI Curious, a rare repeat guest. Excited to have you.
Oh, thank you so much, Jeff. I enjoyed it last time, and I'm excited for this time.
All right. So to peel back the curtain a bit for listeners, Sharon, you and I saw each other in person only a little more than a month ago in New York at the Explorers Club, at the Drawing Room,
So
AI
fabulous.
and Leadership Salon. Thank you. And you were fantastic on stage, and your session was awesome. So your life has like completely transformed in awesome ways in the last 4 weeks. So we'll get into all of that with your new shift to ground level AI. But it was funny. I've barely even mentioned this event that I co-produce and co-host on this podcast. Barely mentioned it. So for listeners, my business partner, the brilliant Jennifer Strong, and I host the Shift podcast. The two of us have created this series of AI and leadership salons where we bring folks like LinkedIn's head of AI, IBM's chief scientist, and brilliant journalists like Sharon Goldman to gather and discuss big picture AI stuff. And so, Sharon, you were on this reporters roundtable we had, and it was a lot of fun. You guys were great. Any takeaways from that? What were some of your reflections from that roundtable or the event?
Well, it was really amazing. We had a really good roundup of stuff. I was sitting next to Steve Rosenbush from the Wall Street Journal. And yeah, I thought it was really interesting. People had some really different takes on some of the issues that we cover. So it was quite spirited, I thought. And I liked that we didn't have all the same opinions and the same answers. And we came at it from a few different angles, since one, I really cover only AI. Steve is really into enterprise tech, and one of the other panelists is really more on the financial side, and the one is more on the workplace side. So that was really interesting. I liked that.
I know we were so fortunate to have you there. And then literally a week or two later, or maybe days later, you announced that you were leaving Fortune to start ground level AI. So to the extent that you're open to it, walk us through that decision. That's really congratulations on the launch. Really exciting stuff. What led you to embark on your own? And I'm super excited to kind of see where it goes.
Thank you so much. Well, I've been covering AI as my daily beat for over 4 years now. Can't believe it. It's flown by.
It's like 40 years for the AI space. 4 years. There's like 7 generations of AI in those past 4 years. Yeah.
I started covering it at a publication called VentureBeat for a little over 4 years ago. This was about 6 months before ChatGPT came out. So you can imagine kind of like the level of takeoff that has happened in AI coverage since then. I was at Fortune for the past 2 years, and I loved it. I just have loved covering this beat as a daily beat. It's exciting. It's never boring, totally overwhelming sometimes. But I think about 6 months ago, I started to realize that I was having quite a bit of FOMO subscribing to some of the real OG tech substackers like Casey Newton and Alex Kantrowitz, and thinking, wow, I wish I could do something like that. It wasn't the time for it. And also, I had been doing sort of a Substack on the side. It was called AI Side Notes. And I really didn't think of it as anything more than, a little side thing where I would promote my Fortune stories, kind of express myself a little more about what was going on in the space. But about 3 months ago, I really decided that, this could be an exciting way for me to both deepen my coverage in certain areas and sort of narrow my focus a little bit. In the early days, even from before I started covering AI, there weren't that many people covering it, and it wasn't so broad. I mean, it was pretty narrow research discipline. It was kind of more under the hood stuff at companies.
Data science, a lot of academics and stuff. Right?
Yeah, analytics, predictive stuff. It wasn't really sexy, and it wasn't something that anyone I knew in my regular life asked me about. Of course, that's completely changed. It immediately changed after ChatGPT. And now it's such an overwhelming beat. Really, any journalist today is covering AI to some extent. And I felt like, that it's really impossible to cover the entire space, and it's time to kind of like dig deep into some sub beats in a way in the AI realm. And that's what I'm trying to do at Ground Level AI. In a broad stroke, I would call it, where AI meets the real world. For me, that means from an industry standpoint, I'm focused on things like AI infrastructure, so physical data centers, but also all the software layers that support the models. It's a huge space right now, very interesting, lots of exciting work being done. a little undercovered, I think. I mean, there's the data storage, there's the actual wires that connect data center racks to each other. There's a million levels of this AI stack that's emerged. But beyond that, I'm also really interested in continuing to cover, I already was at Fortune, AI and cybersecurity, which was also kind of a not so sexy side of the business, but right now it's obviously completely blowing up because of Anthropic's Mythos and the Fable 5 saga. Cybersecurity and AI has really suddenly become front page news. I'm also interested in, making sure I have time to cover some of the policy stuff that's coming up around AI and all the geopolitics that's emerging, whether it's AI, the US versus China, or how the EU is dealing with things in AI. And I feel like a lot of these areas are very interconnected. I mean, obviously, the Anthropic Mythos and Fable story is really one about geopolitics as well. Issues around data centers are also becoming very political. So a lot of these, and then of course, covering enterprise AI really brings in all of these areas. So to me, I'm still covering a very broad swath.
Yeah, it's not exactly a hyper narrow scope. There is no shortage of stories for you anytime soon.
But I do feel like it's an opening for a journalist who also wants to connect the dots between all those things and not just focusing on, sharing the news of the day. So
and I'm guessing I'm excited about. So it's in that spirit of not just the news of the day. I'd love to kind of connect some dots here and kind of like get your thoughts on bigger picture, some of the through lines from your coverage at Fortune and what you're seeing in the AI space and how it's evolving. And let's start with one of, I think, your signature pieces, the data center and Texas story. I'm hoping listeners have read that. If not, links to it in the show notes. But Sharon, kind of give the quick pitch or overview of like what you learned from that piece. And then I'd love to get into a little bit of like, what are some things that your personal reflections didn't quite make it, that didn't have space for online at Fortune that we can get into now?
Well, my last piece at Fortune that published was a story about a community being affected by AI data center being proposed, not yet built or approved, near Waco, Texas. And that was the fourth of a series of 4 stories that I did over the past 6 months that, thinking of it as like when AI comes to town. I traveled to 4 different communities, one in Arizona, one in Louisiana, one in Michigan, and this one in Texas, and explored what's happening to these communities when a data center is, a real estate developer is looking to get a zoning approved to start building. In Louisiana, it's already being built by Meta. And here's the chaos, the construction chaos that this community is going through, but also a lot of businesses are actually benefiting in the community from the thousands and thousands of workers that are coming to town and living in RV parks. I mean, it's just complete chaos. In Michigan, I had a story about a lawsuit where the town actually voted the data center down. This ultimately became an OpenAI and Oracle Stargate site, but once the town turned it down, they were sued and they were sort of forced their hand to actually approve it, and now it's under construction. In Texas, it was a really interesting story about a data center being proposed where the tiny town that lives right next to the land that would be built upon has actually no say in it being built due to some really obscure Texas zoning rules, where another town several miles away is the one that is working with the developer and would actually benefit from property taxes and things like that. So you have these 2 mayors that are kind of like battling with each other. There's a big opposition group down there trying to make sure that it doesn't get built right next to this tiny farming rural community. The land is very beautiful and it's you
This is
know,
a Taylor Sheridan show waiting to happen. For fans of Landman and Yellowstone, this feels like easily the next Taylor Sheridan
yeah,
uh,
yeah.
prestige show. It struck me reading your reporting. One thing I love is the nuance there, that there was not a homogenous reaction by people impacted by these data centers, right? As you said, there's the chaos, but also plenty of townspeople who were like, hey, this is bringing in thousands of jobs to our community. This is good for the economy. What struck you about, like, as you had more and more interviews, what surprised you about the people you talked to and their reflections and perspective on this? And if you had to get a sense of temperature of whether these communities were generally pro, generally con, and what the split of that is, how would you characterize that?
I think in all cases, I feel like the through line was a general lack of transparency and uncertainty about what was going to happen.
Mm.
Like, where in it's true that maybe there were early uh, meetings with leaders of the community that this was coming, but in many cases, it happened very quickly. And a lot of the townspeople felt like they had no idea what was coming, and then suddenly it was happening, or it was suddenly
Yeah.
approved. And so, especially in a place like Louisiana, where Meta's big Richland Parish data center is currently under construction, it's one of the farthest along. It's really like a huge city being built from nothing. And a lot of people just felt like yesterday there was nothing and suddenly it's
Mm.
there. They couldn't recall like a real period of discussion. Whether there was or not doesn't matter. That's what their perception was. I do think it really depends. Like, there are communities like in Louisiana where the community lawmakers and the economic development folks were really for it. Like, they were really pushing to bring this meta site to Northeast Louisiana. And so you do have a good amount of people who, at least in the beginning, were very supportive of it. But in other cases, like in Texas, this is a very speculative project. There's really no clarity around when this would be approved, how it would be approved. And yet the townspeople are very, very concerned about it, and they want to make sure that they have a say. So there, you have a lot of backlash, and I feel like another town that sees the benefit could be there in terms of potential property taxes, but it's very speculative. It's not pie in the sky, I would say, but it's not as for sure happening. In Michigan, people were not in favor. I couldn't find a lot of people in favor. Even the city council members themselves were not in favor. But the way the zoning laws are set up in Michigan, but in a lot of other states, you can't just ban this type of use.
Yeah.
So in this case, the landowners had sold their land, and the Michigan did not have a way to say, no, you can't build a data center here. Maybe there would have been a way to make it harder if they had done certain things beforehand, but it happened so quickly. So that's a community that was very against. In Arizona, it's really interesting. This was the first story I did was back in December. And there, it really seemed like it was, sliding through. There was people didn't really know much about it. It was a very, very rural desert area, not a lot of homes right around it. So you could say, like, if you're going to put a data center anywhere, this could be it. But even so, there was such backlash in Arizona overall that I heard that recently the developer has downsized her pitch of how many buildings it could be. So even there's
Can you elaborate on what specifically the backlash tends to be centered around? Energy, water? Is it the just the garish look of these things and how it impacts the visual footprint of the community? What do folks tend to point to as their reason for being against this?
So it's interesting. I mean, for local communities, like where it's really in your backyard, for the people living like literally next to where it's going to be, they're just, concerned about noise, light, how much electricity is this going to use? How much water is it going to use?
No one wants a power plant next
No
to
one
them,
wants
right?
a power plant next to them. So that's really that.
Yeah.
The problem is that the backlash has sort of grown and sort of mutated in a way so that there's a lot of misinformation and disinformation out there. Some of it is very complicated. That's part of it. Like the water issue.
Yep.
Like it really depends on what kind of system you're using and what kind of access to water there is. It's and relative to other things, is it really using that much water?
Right.
I don't know. The electricity issue is also
Sorry, just quickly jump in there. I agree with you, and it's way more complicated than people might see at first blush. And that I think my understanding is that I'm not saying therefore it's not an issue, but there's, even at the current volume, I think my understanding is there's less water used with data centers than golf courses use, right? Less.
Well, that's what I mean. That's a common.
Right.
That's a common relative. It uses less water than a hamburger shop.
Right.
That type of thing. But it's still complicated because, that might be true in a macro way, but in a specific certain community that's running on wells, for example, they have real concerns about that. It also really depends what type of system you're using. If it's one that is, evaporative, then it's using a lot of water. If it's a closed loop system, as they call it, it might not use a lot of water, might use more electricity, which in turn uses water. So it's hard to say. That's a real complicated one. The electricity component is complicated too. People don't want it running on the grid and taking up so much space that it raises people's rates, but they also don't like when companies build gas plants to run off the grid and, cause pollution and have a tremendous amount of noise from generators, for diesel generators, for example, like they have in Memphis with Elon Musk's XAI data center has famously been sued for that. So it's a complicated story. The problem is that there's a huge backlash from people that don't live near a data center, a mega data center, and it's become almost like a proxy for how much people hate AI altogether. So it's not really about a data center. After a while, it becomes like, we just hate AI generally.
I think there's a bit of tribalism on both sides of this issue, right? Of folks using data centers as a shorthand for I hate AI or LFG build, more AI. I agree. And I think one thing I want to come back to is whether it's ultimately a good or bad thing is complicated. But like your point, I think is a really important one that a lot of people felt like they were just kind of ambushed, right? Even if there was nominally a town meeting on the agenda, it happened quickly. They didn't realize it. I think there's almost a larger metaphor here for AI at large, right? I feel like there's so many of us in this society, like no matter what people are doing, like AI is there's always promise or threat, depending on how you look at it, of AI transforming jobs, industries. There are millions of folks who are like, I didn't ask for this. I don't want this. And now I need to figure out how to, survive in this AI infused world, right? No, I didn't want that, right? And again, I'm not making a statement on either side of that ledger, good or bad, but I think there are a lot of folks who just feel a little flat-footed, like, holy shit, this is happening faster than we would have thought. And I didn't particularly sign up for this, right? So I think there's a lot of that going around.
I think of it as kind of a collision. I think of it as like a collision course between the AI industry, tech folks, everyone who's currently using AI who thinks it should LFG, this is fantastic. And, we think that this is a race against China. We got to go, go, go. And then but the other side, people who didn't sign up for this, who are seeing large data centers come to their communities, not the smaller cloud data centers or little urban data centers that have been there for 15, 20 years and you never noticed them before.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's a bit of a collision course by two parties that don't understand each other and don't speak the language either.
Yeah. Speaking of collision course, let's get to Mythos and Fable. So then that's as ground level as it gets, as far as the actual, like the model has been, it's here. And then 3 days later, no, it's being taken away. Right. So now this is being a little careful because we're recording this about 6 days before it's going to air. So who knows? It might be that Fable is back, then gone again. Maybe there's some new model drop. Maybe, ChatGPT 6 is dropped tomorrow. Who knows? But given where we are right now, Sharon, what do you find is most, what is the most kind of salient or important thing, the precedent being set, or what is striking you most about this standoff with Anthropic and the government and the pretty unprecedented use of the kind of export controls? What are your thoughts on this so far?
I think this is a real turning point. Like this is like a point marked in time where we've been kind of waiting for this. Like regulation hasn't come, nothing's been said as far as national regulations in the US. And here now we have another collision. We have a frontier model coming out that suddenly the US government is very scared of. The only way they could think of to do anything about it was to say, well, no, you can't release it. And this has all sorts of, whether or not it was the right plan. Yeah. I mean, Anthropic believed and said that it's no different than any other frontier model that's out there. The jailbreak that prompted this entire saga in the first place is a jailbreak that could happen to any model. And furthermore, no jailbreak can be completely avoided. All models can be jailbroken with enough effort and creativity. So now we have all sorts of fallout from that. And what happens now? For example, will open models become more popular? Chinese open models, who China's been sort of peddling its own soft power in a way by promoting its open models so that the rest of the world starts
in the gap, just for listeners, the gap between those open models and the tip of a spear frontier, I think it's safe to say that gap has been narrowing over time, right?
Yes, exactly. It's been narrowing over time.
And getting deeper too.
Right. And even if it didn't narrow completely, it could be enough, for other countries to use and decide not to use US models anymore. Would that slow US innovation then if they couldn't release new models? So the closed versus open ongoing debate.
And to that point, what complicates it further is that, for many months, companies were experimenting with agentic solutions and like burning through all these tokens. And we've, of course, seen the stories about token maxing and kind of giving employees benefits and perks if they're using more tokens. And that was when, in many ways, Anthropic and OpenAI were basically subsidizing tokens, saying, and they were kind of giving, hey, here's an all-you-can-eat buffet style plan. Companies were just gobbling up token usage. And now that subsidies are largely going away. So it's costlier for companies to use all these tokens. And then it's like, but maybe these open and cheaper models from China could potentially be a solution for them, right? So it's like, instead of buying a brand new car that has all of these extra features, you get a car that's 3 years older, that's you've already it's a lot less expensive, and you're still getting some, you're getting a upgrade over your current old car, if that analogy makes sense. So there's a lot of various threads here all happening at the same time.
Yeah, for me, one of the biggest threads is around cybersecurity.
Yeah.
The whole issue around the release of Mythos, the release of Fable was about, are these models safe enough to deploy?
Yeah.
And the reason that they did not allow Mythos to be released only to a certain number of critical infrastructure partners was because of those security fears that there were so many vulnerabilities that the model could find that an attacker could use that against a company. But also defenders can also use Mythos and similar models to find those vulnerabilities and patch them. So that's part of the problem here too. Fable being shut down due to a supposed jailbreak is concerning, because not only are they not, it's true that attackers can't use it, but defenders can't sort of catch up and make their own systems more secure using those models. Meanwhile, the open models can also be used by attackers in the same way. So there's a lot of talk now among security people, like, wow, we need to this was a big moment for security people. Like, how are we going to keep our systems safe while these models are getting so much more sophisticated for attackers? How can the defenders use those models too, or similar ones, to try and catch up? Like, it's a constant catch-up game between the defenders and the attackers.
What do you think is the solution for that? Is there any solution for that? Do you have a sense of the best way forward, given that really complicated dynamic?
The answer that I get from AI and AI cybersecurity people is that what Anthropic said it was already doing with Fable, that was its argument. We are already doing all the best practices, called defense in depth, all these layers of security to make it safer. No, you can never make it 100% safe from jailbreaks, but neither is traditional cybersecurity. You can never keep the world safe from hackers, but you can keep your systems safe enough and sort of prioritize and have these layers of security. So that's where there's a big argument now. Security people think that, Fable and Mythos should be available to them so that they can, secure their own systems more. But other security people say that the US government is doing the right thing for now while they figure out how best to go forward. So I think at the moment there's no clear answer, but the thing that makes me optimistic is that there's a very large amount of smart people on the case. And these are people who have dealt with many serious security issues over the years. And I'm really hoping they come up with something.
Yeah, you and me both. And as you point out, there's just so many angles to the Mythos Fable thing. And I know you'll be covering, as part of ground level AI, covering the enterprise as well. And as they try and make AI work in their companies. And I think it's not a stretch to say this is also a business story, right? Because companies, like, one implication of this is that if a company is relying upon one model, and then suddenly the government can, with zero warning, just shut that model down. If you have entire workflows based around this, then you're in real trouble, right? So it's almost like, it means there's so many layers to this. The frontier labs themselves, is a question of, do they own, they have true sovereignty over their model anymore? Can they do, and then for business leaders, it's like, oh, do we need to think about having redundancies and backups? And maybe we focus more on building this model agnostic tools so they can pump in an open source, cheaper model if need be, something like that. Are you hearing from business leaders that's they need to now think about this kind of stuff, and it's adding even more complexity to their AI strategies?
Absolutely. I was in San Francisco last week at the Databricks summit, and that was a big talking point. It was all about companies. This was another, marking point for enterprises to be like, wow, how can we rely on just putting all our eggs in like the Anthropic basket or the OpenAI basket? We can't lock in like this. It's not going to work when you think that a model could just be locked down like that. We need to have other options. I spoke there to one of the Databricks customers. It was a healthcare tech company that sort of helps hospitals. Their AI platform helps hospitals work with insurers, and they said that they're really moving away from frontier models altogether. In fact, they're working on building their own sort of vertical model based on their own data that Cohere is putting together for them. I think that's a huge thing. It's both an issue of that, what you said about, concerns about lock-in. It's also, as you said before, about budget, what's cheaper, transparency, all the things. So I think that enterprise companies are looking for choice now. That was the word I heard a lot.
Yeah. You talk to so many people. You're so deeply well connected and well reported. I'd love your perspective on this. Are we in a bubble? How would you describe the overall AI landscape right now? Is there a bubble? Is it not a bubble? What are your big picture thoughts on that?
I don't really think of it as a bubble anymore.
Yeah.
I do think that there will be things that happen, but I don't, in different areas, I don't see like this huge bubble popping. Just because so much is happening. Like so far, there hasn't been, yes, some of the financials around some of the investments seems crazy, but I don't know that we've seen yet that the demand isn't there and that the money isn't there. Like the revenue isn't there. Like it does seem to be happening. And so I'm sort of loath to say it's just not going to pop and just go away.
Yeah, I think that there's certainly going to be companies that go sideways, no question.
No question.
At the same time, but also to your point, I think to me, a smoking gun is that the main companies, speaking loosely here, serving up this stuff are scrambling to find enough supply to meet the demand. And there's just not enough supply, right? Anthropic has had to throttle down its usage limits because they just don't have enough compute to serve this insatiable appetite for tokens caused by all these agentic systems being spun up, right? So given that there's more demand than supply right now, it's hard to see how that's a bubble, Of course, the day after me saying this, I'm sure the whole thing pops. And in the time we have left here, would love to hear a bit about your thoughts on journalism and AI. And I think you've commented this publicly before about how the AI space is moving so fast. It's almost like a structural challenge to cover it properly, right? What are your thoughts on how we as a media industry are covering it and how you are trying to cover it and how you'll be covering it going forward? And because it is so hard, it is really hard to keep up, much less properly covering it. And then how are you doing it? I would love to hear about how you're staying on top of all this stuff.
It's really hard. Sometimes I feel like I'm up against what has become, a massive PR industry at Anthropic and OpenAI. Some of the biggest companies have hundreds and hundreds of comms folks, controlling messaging and things like that. And so it's really hard to, as a reporter, to push back against that, to try and dig beneath it. That's where I do think that it's become so overwhelming that you do kind of have to pick your lane a little bit within the AI industry and not try to cover everything. Mm-hmm. On the other, I do find it a little frustrating when, you have these, typical embargoed announcements from the big tech companies where every single reporter is writing the same thing on a given day. And I feel like that in today's world, that's kind of useless. I think we need more reporters that are kind of moving into different areas and covering them more deeply, whether it's the startup scene, whether it's like what I'm doing, trying to cover some of the more foundational parts of the stack, whether it's, there's lots of reporters covering the consumer side and sort of the consequences to, as far as the workforce and labor and society and what this means for our futures. But there's so much more out there. So at some point, you just kind of have to accept it and get zen about it. So I try not to worry about it too much anymore. And I just try to, do what I can and cover what I want to cover. And yeah.
Yeah, I love that approach. What will you say is the most undercovered, underreported story or theme out there right now? Maybe that one that you're excited to do more of going forward at Ground Level AI.
Well, I do think that there's a tremendous obsession, almost focus on kind of the sci-fi aspects of what our future will be in AI, which is natural. We all have grown up on sci-fi and fantasy and, but I feel like there's a hyper fixation on those experts that think in this way, that see the world in this way, that we are going to become, the singularity or AGI and all the things. I'm not saying it's not important, because if you have folks at the biggest companies, tech companies in the world that have beliefs that are driving their companies forward, then that's really important. But there's a whole other side of present reality. And I think is still somewhat undercovered is just the massive build out of all this, the billions and billions and billions of dollars being built out on not just physical infrastructure, but digital infrastructure and semiconductors and fabs and the whole chain that is being built out. That's equivalent to the rise of electricity and railroads and the Industrial Revolution. And that build out in itself is having all sorts of consequences, good and bad.
Yeah.
And I guess that's what I feel is really, really interesting, certainly from a technical standpoint. All this software and hardware is just geekily super interesting, but also what it means then when this all gets rolled out, whether it's at the top, the agents and the harnesses, down to the chips and the compute and the data centers and the software that pushes that along. It's all happening in front of our eyes, and I think that's super interesting.
I love that, and I'm so thankful we have you to follow for covering these stories. My answer, by the way, to that is, I think there's a thread. I'm not saying it's not there, but I think a thing that reporters, I'm not sure, are covering as much for reasons that make sense, is the actual impact it's having, the boring impact it's having on businesses, right? And I think that partly because you're right, we get all these amazing press releases about, it's doing all this 5x, 10x, what it can do, is always possibilities. And so the understandable and correct instinct is to, hey, as journalists, we need to show what are the other consequences, what are these issues. That makes sense. But I do think there are, I just know from me speaking to tons of business leaders, often medium-sized companies, right? 100-person construction company, 200-person bank, those kind of companies that are doing very meat and potato basic things with AI they can do now just get a lot more done of their company. And it's like, none of those stories really make like, ooh, it's a big sexy article, right? But it's like, I think it's hard. I don't know that we've quantified what the impact is in the business worlds when companies are able to inject AI to workflows and like not cut their staff, but just like augment staff with this and doing more things and reach more customers and expand their use cases, precisely because it sounds kind of like a puff piece and it's not a great story you want to write. I'm just not sure we don't see a lot of that. But I think that I do think there's an energy that's happening there that's kind of underappreciated a bit as well. That's one of my hot takes too.
Yeah, I mean, I find a lot of this stuff interesting. Like, how is this all impacting, I mean, every part of the business, IT? I mean, it's not sexy, but it's super interesting. I mean, how, as far as productivity, as far as governance, as far as risk, as far as how employees are reacting, it's all there.
Yeah.
There's so many stories.
Last couple of questions for you, Sharon. How are you, as you've just launched Ground Level AI, you're building out this new business. How are you using AI yourself in your workflows and as you're creating all this awesome content? What are some ways you're using AI?
Yeah, I was just thinking about that when you mentioned, solopreneurs and small businesses are also benefiting, and I'm not any different. That's in a way an underreported story too. I mean, It's not that I don't feel like I could have done this without AI. I've been an independent journalist before, but boy, is it sure making it easier. I mean, when I think of what it used to be like to put something like I'm doing together before, it's really different now. I mean, I used Claude to design my logo and my brand colors and things like that, and I could have cobbled something together on Canva or hired someone to do something for me, but it would have taken a lot more time and a lot more money, and I love what came out of it. Even I did a lot of strategizing with the chatbots like Claude and ChatGPT. It might sound a little silly, but bouncing ideas off, and even the title Ground Level AI came out of a chat. I was going through a lot of different ideas. So, and then just the way I use AI, the same I did at Fortune. I mean, I use it all day long not for my writing and not for my writing my articles, but certainly for editing them, for researching, for writing headlines, subheads, SEO, all kinds of things like that. Going back and forth about ideas, proofreading, all of these things I use ChatGPT and Claude and Gemini for every single day.
Hard cosign on all of that. Like I have, in a way, 3 lanes of my business now. There's podcasting, which of course, AI Curious. As some listeners know, I have a second podcast also called The People's AI. That's one lane. Speaking, doing AI workshops for companies, keynote speeches, and so on, that whole rigmarole. And thirdly, this event series, right? That I'm so fortunate that you were part of last month, right? 3 different businesses. There's no way I would be able to keep all of that straight without AI. So I do think that AI's use for solopreneurs is a real thing. Sharon, I could talk to you for 5 more hours, but you have a business to go, you have stories to go cover. You have to keep us informed on the Ground Level AI. Last and most important question for you: where should listeners go to find your work? Give us some URLs. Give us all the plugs.
Well, Ground Level AI is at groundlevel-ai.com. That's the URL. But if you're on Substack, you can search for Sharon Goldman or for Ground Level AI. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on X. I'm on all the social media things. If you Google Sharon Goldman and Ground Level AI, you'll find me too. So I'm pretty easily findable.
And I do encourage everyone to follow, subscribe, all things. I truly think Sharon is one of the most important and best AI journalists and reporters out there. Sharon, I always enjoy your work. It's always a delight to speak with you. Looking forward to the next one. Congrats again to launch and best luck with Ground Level AI.
Thank you so much, Jeff.
Well, there you have it. Thanks again to Sharon Goldman, the founder of Ground Level AI. Definitely subscribe to her work there. Thanks again to my producer, Jasper Chua, for editing the show, for creating YouTube videos, all that good stuff. Thank you to Garrett Lang for our show's theme music. Thank you to you, dear listener. If this is your first time at AI Curious, please consider subscribing, rating it 5 stars, all that good stuff. Send to a friend. Thanks again. See you next time.